All right, we will go ahead and get started with just a little housekeeping. If you all can keep your microphones muted until the end of the presentation, we'll have question and answer then. If you have some questions that you don't want to forget to ask or just come to mind during the presentation, feel free to use the chat. If they're super basic, we'll answer them during the presentation and then read them for everybody at the end. But if they're more kind of detailed, we're just going to go through all the Q&A in the chat at the end, or you can, wait until the end to ask your questions. So here today to talk about DeBoer Park and a few different improvements that are going to be occurring this fall, and mainly the replacement of the pedestrian bridge that has been closed for probably about 2 years now. So we'll get started. So we're going to go through introductions for the project team, give background on all of the 3 different projects that we're talking about, and then talk about what the improvements are going to be for each of those. And then we'll give an overview of schedule, construction impacts, and then have that time for Q&A. So my name is Adam Lind. I'm the Trails Program Manager with Denver Parks and Rec. We also have on our project team, Brittany White, who will be the construction project manager for Denver Parks, Jason Wennen, who's the design PM for the storm sewer improvements on the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure, Blake Russell-Nixon, he'll be the construction PM for Dottie on those storm improvements, and Derek Clark with the Mile High Flood District. That is, they'll be doing some gulch restoration. So big project team, multi-agency improvements here. So the whole presentation is just kind of going to go in this order. I'll do the background information on the PED bridge, and then the storm system upgrades, and then the gulch restoration, and then we'll talk about improvements to each of those 3 again. So we'll start with the PED bridge, obviously in DeBoer Park. If you're probably familiar, but if not, there was a small pedestrian bridge that crossed the gulch, kind of in the middle of the park here. And kind of this is just what it looked like. It's 30-40 feet long, old wooden deck pedestrian bridge. So it was closed in 2023 due to structural issues. It was an unexpected closure. The Dottie Bridge team inspects bridges, both pedestrian and road bridges, on kind of a rolling 3-year cycle. So they do 1/3 of the bridges each year. So in the 3 years between the last inspection, the bridge deteriorated pretty significantly. And since it was unexpected, we didn't have any funding immediately available to start design at that time. So that was part of the delay in getting going and getting the bridge replaced. These are just some of the pictures of that bridge structure. And that was, along the reasons that we had to close it. A lot of the steel pieces were cracking, have holes in them. The way they're just kind of corroding away, the bridge could snap and fall into the gulch at any time with people on it. And the engineers determined it was unsafe to stay open even for pedestrians. So Denver Parks partnered with the Mile High Flood District to start design in 2024. The bridge is over Harvard Gulch, and I mean, it's within the floodway and the floodplain. And there's a lot of surrounding buildings and houses along Harvard Gulch that are also in the floodplain. So, there was a lot of questions of why can't you just replace this bridge with the same bridge or another bridge quickly? Unfortunately, we had to do a lot of design and analysis of whatever structure we put in there, through the modeling, had to have a 0.00 inch impact to that flood elevation. So if our modeling of a new structure showed it had a 0.01 impact based on FEMA floodplain regulations, basically means we can't do that. And so that's kind of why the process wasn't so quick to just replace it with any structure. If this was a bridge that was just over a roadway or something else, we wouldn't have these restrictions and would have been able to move quicker. So additionally, it required that time for hydraulic modeling, analysis, and permitting. That's kind of gotten us to where we are today. So additionally, the construction, we're really only allowed to do construction during what we call the low flow season, which for everybody else is basically just between October and April. It's when we're less likely to have large rain events that could cause flooding, because we don't want to have flooding when we're doing construction in the gulch. So at this point, design is complete and construction is planned to begin this fall on the PED Bridge and actually on all the projects that we're talking about. So we'll switch gears and talk a little bit about the storm system here. So as we were doing these improvements, we linked up with Dottie Wastewater Group, who also was aware of some flooding issues that are occurring on York, really from an undersized storm system here. So there's an existing pipe that runs into the gulch from York Street, collects water and dumps it out into the gulch, and has some issues in terms of being undersized, and the kind of direction of the pipes isn't great for flow and getting water from the street to the gulch. So this was some of the background issue on the current conditions of the storm system there. So the storm drainage master plan identified improvements for York Street, and the design team was able to include some of these improvements kind of with this DeBoer Park project to get into construction this fall. So this includes larger storm inlets on York and a larger outfall pipes into Harvard Gulch, which will help get more water from the street into the gulch, but it's not going to address all of the issues. A much larger project would need to occur to really address every flooding issue that's happening in the area, but this will help in minor storms. And then part 3 of this is a gulch restoration project. So channel improvements were done in 2001, which basically replaced the old concrete line channel to a higher capacity channel that has what you see today with boulders and vegetation to improve flood conveyance and park aesthetic. Over time, sediment accumulation and vegetation has overgrown and really reduced the ability of the waterway to flow correctly. Additionally, some of the beaver activity had compounded that problem that was happening right around the outfall and really causing water to back up in multiple directions. So I think this picture is really telling. I've lived in Denver for about 7 years, and the picture on the right is kind of how I know Harvard Gulch, and thought, oh yeah, the gulch is like 10 feet across, but you can see on the left when it was originally done, it's really about 30 to 40 feet across. So it's a much bigger waterway than most people might expect in this area. And all that vegetation is really causing backups and making it more difficult for the water to flow during storms. And so that kind of just has trickle down effects with backups of storm water to those pipes and then onto York Street and other areas. So the goal is to restore the gulch channel back to this 2002 view. So we'll jump to the proposed improvements now and go first to the pedestrian bridge. So the new bridge will be what we call a low flow crossing. We have lots of these across Denver and are very familiar with how to design and build them. It'll be in the same location. And then, as I mentioned previously, due to all the floodplain constraints and updated rules and regulations, we weren't able to put back the same type of bridge. So the structure will be wider than what was there. I think it was maybe a 6-foot wide bridge, maybe 8. So the new bridge will be 10 foot wide and also have 5-foot rumble strips across, but there won't be any railings. So the wider bridge is there to replace the railings as kind of like a recovery zone. So this is more or less what the new kind of design looks like. We've got a little bit of trail widening on both sides of the bridge to bring that up to our kind of standard of 10 feet wide. The kind of middle section here is the 10-foot wide trail, and then on the side, the hatched area are those recovery rumble strips. So it's designed for normal flows, a lot of water to go underneath. But if there is a really big storm, then the flows will go over top, and then as the waters recede, it'll drop back down, and the bridge will be functional as it always is. So this picture here is more or less what you'll see in DeBoer on Harvard Gulch. Once the project is done, the red rumble strips on the side are that recovery zone, and then it's just kind of a typical open trail on the approaches and through the middle. So this is what we'll be building here shortly. So as I mentioned, the project will also include some widening for the kind of ends of that. So when we do a larger project, we'll be tying in to 10-foot wide trail and won't have to rebuild that. And we'll also be replacing the existing Excel light that was kind of in the area with the new solar light. So that kind of covers our pedestrian bridge improvements. For the storm system, just wanted to show this comparison, right? We have the existing storm size and details on the left. And so the new system will have two 30-inch pipes where the old system just had one. And York Street had a single inlet there. It'll now have a triple inlet, and it'll continue to outfall into Harvard Gulch, but with larger pipes. So that should help in a lot of storms get more water from the street into the gulch and down its way into the Platte. So this is just kind of from our engineering drawings. You can see the new layout of the dual pipes and the triple inlets there on York Street. The red area is kind of like that construction zone. So there will be some impacts, which we'll talk about more, just to the turf that'll be replaced, but no impacts to trees, no tree removal. We'll have tree protection fencing up to keep those trees safe during construction. And then lastly, for the gulch restoration, as we mentioned, the goal is to restore the original design and channel capacity, facilitate moving water downstream and away from York Street, enhance the ecological habitat and improve water quality, improve the aesthetic value, and that'll help with long-term monitoring of vegetation and beaver activity will kind of be ongoing. So lastly, just wanted to touch on some landscape transformation that's also going to happen at this time. So along the waterway, we've been trying to, as a city, create kind of more natural vegetated areas and not have turf and chemicals that we need to treat and running so close into the streams. A lot of this area in green will be damaged during the gulch restoration project. So at that time, instead of going back and putting in expensive sod that uses a lot of water, is difficult to maintain, we're going to do a transformation and plant back with new native vegetation. So if you're familiar with that, there's some species here that are listed. And if you're not familiar with that, it's just more of a natural kind of seed mix and vegetation mix that goes along waterways. So it's not going to be 3-4 feet high. We're not looking to grow any tall species of grass there, but it's also not going to necessarily be 1 inch of turf grass, except when we mow it, and it will get mowed a few times a year. So that's the plan as we restore that area. The other areas that I mentioned, closer to kind of like the playground and where the storm pipes are going in, will get back put back to sod that exists today. So schedule, we're finally at that point of construction. You'll start to see the contractor mobilize for that gulch restoration starting in the next 2 to 3 weeks. They'll start mobilizing. The plan is for them to do all of their work, get out of the area, and then our other contractor that'll be doing the other improvements will move in. So that should be in December for the pedestrian bridge and storm sewer improvements. And talking with our contractor, we're hoping they'll be able to have more crews available and be able to put a lot of energy into this area and get everything built in and out in 2 to 3 months. So by the end of February, we're hoping for all of that kind of heavy construction to be completed. And since that'll probably be in winter, there'll be a little bit of a delay and a gap between that work ending and when we can get back in there, plant the turf grass, turn the irrigation back on for that small area adjacent to York Street. And then throughout 2026, there'll be contractors on site monitoring the vegetation and native seeding, and doing some additional work if the seed needs, depending on how the weather is, right? If it's really dry, if it's wet, the vegetation and growth can change. So we'll be monitoring the area and taking care of it as needed to establish that new vegetation. So I did want to talk a little bit about impacts. Obviously for the bridge, there's been a detour and a closure in place for a while. And so we've been sending people down Gaylord to Vassar and kind of back up to get to the other side. So that'll continue throughout this process. During the gulch restoration up here on Harvard Avenue, the parking lane will be blocked off for construction vehicles and staging. So that'll be something new that'll happen for that month to 2 month time period there. And then when that's done, that parking lane will then be available during construction of the storm sewer project, it's likely that York Street will be closed to through traffic in this area outlined in red. So if you live in this building, you'll still be able to use the driveway to the north. And same thing, if you live in the building to the south, you'll still have driveway access. But York Street will be blocked off, so there'll be detours set up and signed for vehicles and bicyclists and pedestrians if needed, to get around this area, which will just kind of send you to the west or the east to the next street. Um, Same thing for the pedestrian bridge. There might be some times when we need to use a different detour, so could use the street to the west to get down to Vassar. But all of this will be signed and communicated both for bikes, pedestrians, and drivers during construction, and we'll be hopefully moving with our contractor quickly to minimize all of those detours and get the construction completed as quick as we can. So with that, we can turn it over to Q&A. Thank you all for attending. And yeah, Brittany, I think you're gonna be the MC if there was any questions.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. We actually didn't receive any questions yet. Just a comment that it's great to replace with native grass, which I agree. So thanks for that comment.
Great. So if anybody here does have questions, you can unmute yourself and speak your mind, or you can just type it into the Q&A and Brittany will read it out for the group to answer.
I had a question. Oh,
Cindy, go ahead.
yeah.
Parking, right?
Well, yes, I mean, that heavily impacts our building, so that's the street will be closed in front of our building. And you say the north entrance to our parking lot is going to be still open, correct?
Correct.
The other thing, so you're staging along Harvard to the west of our building. So one thing, having been through the construction in the new building that is across University, we had, and they staged on that same part, we had diesel trucks lining up at 5 a.m. and running those diesels constantly until the construction site opened at 8 because they wanted to be first in line for whatever was happening. So I'd like some assurance that that's not going to be the case for this project. I realize that was a private entity. This is the city. But I'm worried that we might have the same issue.
Yeah. I don't know, Brittany, if you want to jump in, or Derek, you're more tied in with those contractors, but I don't think any of the work we're doing will require any 2-3 hour lead times on people with like diesel trucks or anything like that lined up. So I can't expect that happen, but yeah, I'll let Brittany jump in there.
Yeah, thanks, Cindy, for that question. I definitely appreciate your concern there. We do have set working hours that we always want to make sure that we communicate with our contractors about, so there won't be any noise before 7 a.m. However, the running of the diesel trucks is something that, we can keep an eye on and make sure that that's not going to be an issue. If you do notice something, you can always feel free to reach out to me. I'm going to put my email in the chat so that if anything does come up during construction, just please feel free to reach out and let me know what your concern is.
I have a concern about parking. DU students park heavily along York now and along Vassar, and parking is really scarce during this time. Will there be any help rerouting that parking? Because I know, Cindy, that people with second cars in your building also park on York.
Correct.
Or on Harvard.
Correct.
And if it's closed down there and they can't park on York to the north, where are they going to park and then struggle to get through the construction back to your building for those who have second cars? And we already have this terrible problem with DU parking.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think it's something we can take back to our team as we're designing the closures. because the work zone is really going to be relatively small in terms of where it's located. So at least what I've seen around my neighborhood is, right, like it'll be closed to through traffic during the day when construction is active, but then outside of those hours, people tend to be able to still park along the street. So that's something we can look at, right? Like they can block off the one small construction area that's actually under construction at the end of a day. And depending on which phase of the project is there might be opportunities to open up more parking at night when they're not in construction. Just kind of depends on how much impact they're having to the street at that day or time.
It's during the day that people park for DU.
Okay. Yeah, we'll have to get together as a team and talk with our
Yeah.
right away team that gives permits and talk about how this closure will impact that and what we can do to ease that pain during construction.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up.
Oh,
Anybody else have any questions or comments on this?
This is Cindy again. You mentioned construction can start at 7. When does it end?
Our normal hours are 7 to 7. It's a Denver, I don't think that's just DPR, although I could be mistaken, but yeah, we're typically that's what our normal construction hours are, Monday through Friday.
Thanks.
The question, this is Janet, the gulch to the east of University is just filled with vegetation. Will that impact this project at all?
Derek, you have any thoughts on that? I mean, my thought is no is the easy answer. Mile High Flood District does kind of ongoing maintenance with vegetation throughout the year, so we can definitely flag that for their contractor to get out and look at and see if some of the recent storms or just throughout the summer additional vegetation has come up, and if it's kind of quick maintenance of debris removal or if it would require something larger. But yeah, Derek, jump in if you got anything else to add.
no, yeah, I'd agree with that, Adam, and appreciate you bringing that up, Janet. We'll definitely add that to our list. Obviously, Harvard Gulch is something that, as part of our routine contract, is something we manage on that routine trash and debris pickup and vegetation management. So just you bringing that to attention, I'll make sure that gets with our environmental team, that it's a spot we can keep an eye on this year. But to answer your original question, no, that vegetation doesn't have any direct impact on what we're trying to do here or the outcome of what we're trying to get here.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Well, I think I saw somebody from Councilman Cashman's office jump on. So we'll be continuing to communicate through their office as construction gets closer and, give you guys like share with the community an actual day of, all right, this is when you'll start to see construction, or this is when you'll start to see people mobilizing, and then when construction can start. So we'll keep communicating through the councilman's office for that. And yeah, like Brittany put her email in. If Cindy, I don't know if you represent the building or just live there, but if you guys have some kind of listserv or somebody that can be a point of contact, we'd love to have that information and can keep you guys even more in the loop since you're directly adjacent to the construction site. So
I
Yeah,
think
I
I
can
have
send
one
you
more
that info.
question. Oh,
Yeah.
sorry. Coming from the east and going across that great crosswalk now on University, how do I get around the bridge being out? In other words, do I have to go across at University and Yale and then walk?
I think right now how it's kind of signed is when you get to York Street, you would, instead of kind of going north on York to the trail, you just cross at Vassar and then can go up Gaylord and tie in and keep going west.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. All right. Well, otherwise, just want to say thanks to you all for being here and your questions. And if there's nothing else, we can wrap up, and we'll also have this video to be posted to our YouTube channel. So we'll share that with you guys if you email us, and with the councilman's office, so that he can send it out as well. So you can send this to people that may have missed the meeting, had other things going on today.
Thank you, Adam. I'm going to go ahead and end the meeting. Have a
Okay,
good night.
great.
Thank you,
Thanks, Laura.
Adam. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, everybody, for attending.